I watch too much materialistic content is my problem, so I'm always getting the other side. One response that I'll hear often is the idea that it's just biology and the information is being imposed by the human.
Is the genetic code really a code?
It certainly is a code. You can read it as a code, but even transcribe a book into DNA letters, and you could read it out again. You could preserve it in DNA. That's how code-like it is. It really is a completely code-like code. A digital code is merely quaternary rather than binary, and of course, it's not put together by design.
So, Dave, do you agree that DNA contains highly specific information?
Of a living organism, yeah. Not in general, right? It can be, you can have a DNA strand of any random nucleobases, but the DNA of a living organism has the code for that organism, yeah.
Okay, so DNA is not just like a chemical blob. It stores instructions using symbolic sequences.
No, it's not a symbolic sequence. It's a sequence of nucleobases, right? You just have ACTG in some order. That doesn't make it a blob, right? So let's save some time. You're going to do a whole like specified information William Dembski thing, right?
Computer code, books, blueprints, software.
Yeah, those are all things that humans created. Humans can create things. That doesn't mean that DNA was made by intelligence.
Do humans have minds? Do humans have minds?
Let's get a finger on the mute and disconnect button here. This guy's getting real testy.
One of the irritating arguments that I get like every day is this stupid notion that that coded information always comes from a mind, and therefore DNA is proof of God because DNA is assumed to be a code. And but while we could argue that there is an analogous interpretation of that, if we were to say that because of this analog in our understanding that we say that changes in the construct will produce different proteins or whatever, and therefore the changes that it codes for different proteins. If we use that kind of language and call it a code in that capacity, then DNA would be the exception to the rule because it obviously does not come from a mind, and there's no way that a mind could do that.
For the person who sort of thinks it's just biology doing biology, and we're the ones.
Yeah, this objection in a number of ways is that, well, the idea of information is just a metaphor, or we're imputing the presence of information and we're anthropomorphizing. But actually, there's a very specific mathematical definition of the kind of information that's present inside living systems. It's Shannon information plus specificity required for function. And so when you break down what's actually going on, what's going on meets the definition of specified information, or as Leslie Orgel, one of the early or pioneers in origin of life research, termed it specified complexity. People a lot of times will say, well, specified complexity, that's an intelligent design terminology that they invented. No, it came out of origin of life research. Orgel was contrasting crystals that have a repetitive and highly ordered pattern, NaCl, NaCl, redundancy, where you get the same pattern over and over again, with random polymers that perform no function. They've just a series of, say, amino acids that can do nothing, with polymers, biomacromolecules that have the property of specificity of arrangement in order to produce a function. And that's what we call specified complexity. And in our uniform and repeated experience, which is what's present in DNA, what's present in proteins, and in our uniform and repeated experience, which is the basis of all scientific reasoning, whenever you see specified complexity or specified information would be another way to refer to it, it's always the product of a mind. And so there's a very precise definition of from the information sciences of the type of phenomenon that's present in DNA and in RNA, in proteins. And that phenomenon can be called a specified complex sequence. And when we have specified complexity present in any system where we've known the origin, it's always been the product of intelligence. So this is not something that's being imputed. This is something that's present in the molecule. And when the whole of molecular biology is built on teleological language, unavoidable teleological language. We have code, we have text, we have code, we have translation, we have transcription, we have information processing systems. This is the way molecular biologists have to talk to describe what's going on. And we're also discovering known computer design patterns in the information processing system of the cell. You have automated error correction. You can watch it happening. We have spell check in the computer. Well, we've got automated error correction in molecular biology. You have hierarchical filing of information. There's a hierarchical organization of the information in the genome and beyond the genome. And so these when we had a computer programmer from Microsoft, and one of their elite architect level programmers several years ago, write 10,000 lines of code so that we could depict the gene expression system, the protein, the system of protein synthesis. One day he came into my office and threw a book down on my table called Design Patterns, a manual for software engineers. And he said, I get an eerie feeling that someone figured this out before us. And I said, what do you mean? And he explained that a design pattern is a known strategy for storing or processing digital information. And there are multiple known computer design patterns at work inside the cell that he was learning about as he was learning how the information in DNA is expressed in proteins. So information in living systems is not merely a metaphor. It's not a concept that we're imputing onto what's going on in biology. By any reasonable understanding of key definitions of types of information, there is a very important type of information present in the cell, and that is specified information or functional information or specified complexity, where each of these terms means roughly the same thing. A highly improbable sequence, which is in which the parts of the sequence are nevertheless specifically arranged as a condition of performing an independent function. And that is exactly what's going on inside the DNA and the protein, the DNA protein system.
That's an interesting point you're making at the end there as well, about how often in science people are kind of in their own area of expertise and specialty. And I know more recently you guys have been focusing on getting like the engineers together with the biologists and getting people to look at this from both of those modalities to kind of unpack everything that's going on. And I think that's such an important understanding as well, that when like a computer engineer or a software engineer specialist looks at this, they're like, you just gave a great example of, they're seeing it jumping off the page to them.
They're seeing things that biologists don't see.
Right.
Because they understand the informational dynamics of any information. They understand the dynamics of any information processing system. They understand the kind of engineering constraints that need to be applied first to produce information and then to process it in a way that will achieve a functional endpoint. And biology is all about function. You can't get away from teleological language in biology, because every part of a living system is doing something for something else. It's doing something in service of the survival of the organism ultimately, and often multiple penultimate sort of lower level goals that are in service of that higher level goal of survival. So it's impossible to understand biology without understanding the functional logic of a biological system. And that has all to do with the storage and processing and expression of information, both genetic information, and we're now finding information at higher levels and stored in other types of systems. Carbohydrates, for example, have arguably more information stored in them than do nucleic acids, the famous DNA and DNA and RNA molecules. So what you have in biology is wheels within wheels of integrated functional complexity that is dependent on information. And your little video just completely ignores that. And
hey, I didn't make it. I'm just a messenger.
Yeah, I'm not blaming you, Brandon, but I am triggering me this morning. I was in a good mood until we started talking. It's interesting to see, first of all, how easily people will accept something like that. And secondly, how weak the arguments are on the other side when you get into the science, and often, people that have a faith perspective, or if you accept, heaven forbid, the theory of intelligent design. This is my Wikipedia page claims that I'm a pseudoscientist, and so, well, fair enough, call me what you will, but there is no science in a video like what you just showed, and the scientific problems with that are legion, and our team knows them very well, and it's one of the reasons that we think intelligent design is actually part of the story, because we know from, again, our uniform and repeated experience that whenever we see information and we trace it back to its source, we always come to a mind, not a material process, whether it's digital code in a software or a paragraph in a book, or the information we're transmitting right now, or information in a radio signal, or a hieroglyphic inscription. Information is a hallmark of mind, and you cannot build life without it. And that is, I think, clue one that life was designed by a master programmer.
So you've just given me a perfect transitional point. Before I make it, I want to just say that as a compliment, as amazing as you are at articulating all of this with words, there's something about seeing the animation in the documentary that is powerful in a different way. It's just like, if that's all true, if everything that animation is depicting is true, which I know that it is,
it's just basic molecular biology.
That's what I'm saying. But as a person who hasn't taken those courses and really seen it all, like to look at it and see the mechanisms and see the little guy walking along the string and like all these things, it strikes you in a way beyond what even a verbal description does.
Sure, right.
And so again, nothing against.
That's why we wanted to bring it to life. Picture's worth 1,000 words, and a moving picture that's accurate to what we know scientifically, worth many orders of magnitude more. And what you're describing is the kinesin walking motor protein, which step by step tows vesicles of material along fibers in the cell, and that function essentially like railroad tracks. So there's a whole automated factory of materials being moved from one place to another to where they're needed. That's just one of many molecular machines. We depict the ATP synthase, which is the turbine that's responsible for producing the energy-rich ATP molecules that make all metabolic processes possible. We depict the flagellar motor, or the little rotary engine that Michael Behe has made famous. And that's just one. Then we get into the digital information processing system. We show the information processing system, or one of them. There are two major information processing systems in the cell, one for the replication of information called DNA replication, and one for the expression of information in the form of proteins. And we show that system in a step-by-step way, in a kind of living color. It's pretty awesome. So with narration from one of our top scientists, Douglas Axe, who did his PhD at Caltech and had a long-term research appointment at Cambridge University. So really, some really top scientists in the film. And but you're right, the aesthetic and visual dimension of this brings this to life.
Yeah, no, it was also great to see it in the documentary, the different voices that you brought in. It wasn't all, theist even. Like, I love to see that agreement within the scientific community around some of the core facts that were being described. And then, I like how you guys handled it too, where it's like, let the implications of this kind of just rest on you. Just ponder this. At times you didn't push it like in a over the top way, but it's just like, man, so one thing I wanted to go to here, I got to be sensitive on our time, Dr. Meyer, because I could literally talk to you for hours. So I got to keep the ball rolling, but I want to stay on this point too. So let me go. This is what I was going to transition into. Is you brought up your Wikipedia page and sort of the pseudoscientific accusation, and obviously all that really is. We talked about this on our last podcast. Is just a pre-commitment to methodological naturalism, right? But I want people to really understand how silly that is to say. Like, if you could just help walk someone through that, if you're seeing all kinds of evidence pointing in a particular direction, but you've decided at the front, we're going to call that evidence, we're going to call that a God of the gaps. if it points us there. We're just going to say, no matter what, it's a gap because we said so. It's a gap because we set the parameters on the outset. So now anything that points there, we're calling a God of the gaps, rather than, wait a second, there's just all kinds of evidence pointing in the direction of intelligent design. If you just don't start with the firmly held belief that there is no God, we know that's true. We know that there's no God, so therefore we call it a God of the gaps argument any time that something points us in that direction. Like, can you just help walk?
Let's break it down, and we'll start with that big hairy term that you threw out there: methodological naturalism or methodological materialism.
The Darwinian mechanism of mutation and selection, which has long been posed as a kind of designer substitute mechanism, cannot build those systems, then perhaps they look designed because they really were designed. But there's an even deeper consideration that points to intelligent design in biology.
One of the most brilliant theories of modern science was formulated by an American, J.D. Watson, and an Englishman, F.H.C. Crick.
As soon as we met, we found that although we had very different backgrounds, we had a lot of things in common.